Zoro is already naturally powerful. But what if, at the very beginning of his journey, he had the devil fruits that helped some of the strongest pirates in the One Piece world become the emperors of the sea? So, I ask you, how would Zoro's journey change if he ate each of the Yonko's Akuma no Mi? Would he defeat Mihawk in any of these versions? Would he make Luffy's journey easier? Come along with us, because you'll be surprised at the level of power Zoro could achieve with the abilities of these Akuma no Mi. To start, let's imagine that back on Shimotsuki Island, where Zoro was raised, he had eaten the Bara Bara no Mi, the fruit that allows its user to separate into pieces. The years of training would be focused on two things: perfecting his Santoryu style, which requires intense practice, and learning to use the power to split apart, taking advantage of this skill both defensively and for surprise attacks against opponents. Following this idea, he arrives in Shell's town and is imprisoned by Helmeppo. The story is exactly the same as we saw at the beginning of the series. Zoro agrees to stay imprisoned for 10 days, but when Luffy warns him that Helmeppo plans to kill him, he splits apart, cuts the ropes binding him, and decides to take on the entire marine base. While Luffy takes down dozens of soldiers, Zoro easily defeats Morgan, as the axe arm can't harm someone who can split into pieces. Thus, he joins Luffy on this new journey. They pass through Orange Town and Syrup Village even more easily, and here we arrive at a crucial point, the Baratie. Mihawk appears, and Zoro finds his long-awaited opponent. Mihawk tries to finish Zoro off with just a small knife, but it's completely useless, as Zoro can split apart effortlessly. Mihawk even becomes excited to face an opponent who not only possesses a tricky fruit for swordsmen, but is also a formidable swordsman himself. This makes the world's greatest swordsman eager enough to draw his Yoru. Mihawk knows he can easily surpass Zoro with a burst of Haki, as Haki overcomes devil fruits. So he spends more than 10 minutes cutting and watching Zoro recover, to test if the opponent honors his words. Even when humiliated, Zoro presses on because if he retreats, the promises he made will be in vain. Thus, Mihawk recognizes Zoro's determination, and since a Haki attack would certainly kill him, he tells Zoro to train and become stronger to surpass him one day. Since there were no fatal cuts, Zoro arrives intact at Fishman Island, which greatly helps Luffy in the battle against Arlong. In Logue Town, the Bara Bara no Mi doesn't cause any significant changes in the story. In Alabasta, Zoro would not be cut by Daz Bones' laminated steel, but he would still have to push himself to the limit to defeat Baroque Works officer. In Skypia, Zoro easily defeats Ohm since he cannot be cut. However, against Enel, he loses easily as his fruit offers no advantage. In Water 7 and Eni's Lobby, things proceed almost exactly as in the original story, since the Bara Bara no Mi cannot interfere with the overwhelming strength of Kaku and Rob Lucci. In the battle against Ryuma in Thriller Bark, it would be interesting to see the sword god unable to cut the Zoro who can split apart. Against Kuma, Zoro wouldn't be able to do anything differently, and so he follows the same training path for 2 years. From here, things wouldn't be so different. So let's go straight to Wano in the battle against Kaido. The ability to separate his arms and head in the air gives Zoro a huge advantage in fighting against Zeus and Prometheus, the two homies of Big Mom. Zoro literally splits apart and easily cuts Big Mom's homies. Amazingly, this allows him to hold Zeus and Prometheus, throwing Big Mom into the sea, according to the plan devised by Kid and Law. Since Prometheus, the one responsible for saving Big Mom, would be trapped by Zoro, she falls into the sea and truly dies. With Big Mom out of the fight, Law descends to the lower part of Onigashima with a weary Zoro, while Luffy, Kid, and Killer continue to battle Kaido. With one less Yonko in the battle, Law can assist in the fight against the calamities, while Kid and Killer buy time until Luffy recovers from his resurrections to face Kaido. Thus, Big Mom would truly die, and Luffy would have extra help in the battle against Kaido. Now let's talk about the Soru Soru no Mi, the soul fruit. This might be the most interesting fruit to imagine with Zoro, because with these powers, he would bring to life nothing less than his Wado Ichimonji. Since he has no special bond with the other two swords, Zoro only animates the Wado, as he wouldn't see the point in forming attachments with ordinary swords. Thus, upon arriving at Shell's town, Helmeppo wouldn't even have the courage to threaten Zoro, the demon who takes the life of anyone who fears him. Zoro already instilled fear in the East Blue, but with his talking sword and the power to steal the life of anyone who feels afraid of him, he has no trouble in Shell's town. However, he has a surprise, Monkey D. Luffy. Amid all the people who feared the pirate hunter, Luffy stands out for having no fear at all, and with all his innocence he asks Zoro to join him as his companion. Zoro even tries to take a few days off Luffy's lifespan just to ensure that the Straw Hat really doesn't fear him. Curious to know more about that rubbery guy who was afraid of nothing, Zoro agrees to board the ship. Let's go straight to the Barati, where the confrontation between Zoro and Mihawk takes place. The world's greatest swordsman is astonished to see that the Wado Ichimonji, one of the most legendary swords, is now alive. But that is not enough to change the sad and cutting outcome of this battle. This is where things change. Zoro acquires the cursed sword Sandai Kitetsu. Even though it is a sword of questionable nature, Zoro decides to bring it to life, gaining another companion. In Alabasta, he defeats Das Bones after his swords teach him how to cut steel. Against Enel, this wouldn't make a difference, but during the battle, the Wado Ichimonji explains to Zoro that he needs to learn to use Haki to attack a Logia user. Thus, he becomes aware of the concept of Haki. Things improve even further when he acquires Shusui from the legendary Ryuma. With this black blade, Zoro brings it to life and quickly forms an affinity with it, as Shusui trusts the man to whom Ryuma entrusted his sword. In this way, besides helping him understand the concept of Haki, it teaches Zoro how to make his blades permanently black. We then move on to his training with Mihawk. With some knowledge of Haki thanks to his swords, Zoro further evolves in mastering this power, with 3 legendary swords that talk and assist him in combat, along with an even more refined Haki. He defeats all the villains until we reach Onigashima in the battle against Kaido. It's worth noting that Shusui became so attached to Zoro that it refused to go with Hiyori. In other words, Zoro kept it instead of taking Enma. Zoro's attack is brutal. He truly leaves the beast with a wound even greater than the one Odin caused. But this does not prevent him from becoming completely exhausted after enduring the Hakai from Big Mom and Kaido. Thus, he descends to fight against King and wins even more easily, as Shusui possesses memories of past battles against Lunarians. Additionally, Zoro is about to turn his blade black, bringing him even closer to surpassing his own captain. With the powers of the Guragura no Mi, the initial plot does not change. Zoro joins the crew, but when facing Mihawk, he provides a battle of epic proportions. He truly creates immense chaos with his tsunamis, which are split apart as he tries to attack in the Santoryu style, to prevent the restaurant of the hardworking chefs from being destroyed during the battle. Mihawk finishes Zoro right then and there. We move on to Alabasta, where Zoro puts on a show. In addition to destroying Das Bones' steel with his tremors, he helps his captain in the battle against Crocodile, since Luffy wouldn't be able to hit the opponent. In Skypiea, despite being more destructive, Zoro still cannot stop the speed of an intangible lightning bolt. In Enies lobby, Zoro uses his powers mercilessly to destroy the government monument and leaves as the hero of the day. After the time skip, Zoro is now able to break the very air with his swords while attacking with his Buso Shokuhaki. It goes without saying that he easily makes his way through the new world, right? He arrives at the battle against Kaido as the strongest among the supernovas. Just imagine, Zoro activates his Ashura mode with Conqueror's Haki and the largest tremor concentrated throughout his life. The attack not only cuts Kaido's skin, but also damages his body from the inside out due to the tremors caused by Zoro, which intensify within Kaido's body. He ultimately falls unconscious from the excess power, but that is enough for Luffy to defeat the beast even in his 4th gear. After all, Zoro's attack was one of the most powerful the world of One Piece has ever seen. As a user of the Wowo no Mi, the dragon fruit, Zoro faces a dilemma. He loves being a swordsman. His pride does not allow him to fight in any other way, as his promise is to become the greatest swordsman in the world. If he transformed into a dragon, he wouldn't be able to fight with swords. Therefore, even knowing that he possesses one of the most powerful fruits in the world, Zoro refuses to transform, keeping his focus on reaching the top as a swordsman. In the fight against Mihawk, the Hawkeyes admires him, knowing the story of this hunter who refuses to transform into a dragon. Out of respect, Mihawk strikes him head-on. In Sabaody, we have an emblematic moment. Zoro sees all his friends being defeated by Kuma. Before Kuma can attack Luffy, Zoro sets aside his pride and transforms into a dragon in an act of desperation. This dragon causes destruction around him, but Zoro is easily sent flying by Kuma. During his training with Mihawk, Zoro feels downcast as he realizes he had the power necessary to save his friends, but he didn't know how to use it due to his pride and lack of practice. Mihawk encourages him not to abandon his pride and shows Zoro the possibility of a hybrid form where he maintains his human body while harnessing the strength of the mythical dragon. In other words, Zoro can utilize the power of the dragon while preserving his fighting essence. 2 years pass, and Zoro masters this hybrid form. In addition to enhancing his haki, we arrive in Wano. Zoro is the most resilient being in the world, second only to Big Mom. Kaido remains a monster, but without the dragon fruit, he cannot pierce Zoro's skin in his dragon hybrid form. Zoro's body becomes much larger in this form, allowing him to use the Sentoryu style even more effectively due to his size. Furthermore, the nearly 2-meter length of Enma is no longer a problem. Thus, Zoro defeats Kaido, becoming the great hero of Wano. With the fruit of darkness, Zoro is able to swallow everything with his shadows. The whole world fears this monster, but Luffy is the only one who shows compassion for this demon, inviting him to join his crew. Thus, Zoro begins his journey relentlessly. Even with all this power, he is no match for Mihawk, who can cut him without much difficulty. In Alabasta, he easily defeats Daz Bones. By nullifying his opponent's steel powers, he cuts him without needing to learn how to cut steel. But this brings a problem that may affect the future. Zoro is not evolving in his swordsmanship, which could come back to haunt him later. In Skypiea, Zoro finally defeats Enel. He nullifies his opponent's Logia powers and cuts him lethally. In Water 7, Zoro nullifies the Zoan powers of the agents and defeats them right there with Luffy's help. Zoro proves that he is the strongest in the crew. In the battle against Kuma in Thriller Bark, Zoro comes very close to stopping the Shichibukai, but Kuma's experience with his Akuma no Mi ultimately leads to Zoro's defeat. We arrive at Zoro's training with Mihawk. The world's greatest swordsman says something that displeases Zoro. By having abused the powers of your Akuma no Mi, you have neglected your evolution as a swordsman. Therefore, you are weaker than you think. Still, Zoro spends these 2 years of training focused on swordsmanship. He truly improves, but does not reach the skill level he would have had in his original version without an Akuma no Mi. Despite this, he breezes through the opponents of the new world with ease. When he finally faces Kaido, Zoro has a plan: to nullify Kaido's dragon powers to remove his scales and then attack with a concentrated blow from Santoryu. He succeeds. Zoro nullifies Kaido's transformation and attacks only the beast's natural skin, but in the end, he can't even cut him. There are 2 reasons for this. First, Kaido's natural body is already extremely resilient, and second, Zoro is not that skilled in swordsmanship. As Mihawk and I said, by abusing the powers of the Yami Yami no Mi, he neglected his evolution as a swordsman and is now not strong enough to cut Kaido's skin. Thus, he is defeated by a blow from the beast's Kanabo, which does not tolerate a swordsman who limits himself to the powers of an Akuma no Mi. A sad end for the Zoro of Darkness. There's still a lot of content in this style to come, videos about Luffy, about Zoro, so to stay updated on the upcoming videos, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you whenever a new video is posted. Thank you very much for your attention, a big hug, and see you next time.